Yeah, somebody had a question? Up front.
The opening sequence where they show the crime scene, was that based on the actual photos or was just the notification?
Yeah, the question is, was the crime scene at the beginning based on actual photos? And the answer is yes. It was all exact. We actually took all the crime scene photos, and our production designer, Mark Ricker, and I, went through and talked. He literally replicated Mrs. Brown's trailer exactly, and to the smear marks of blood on the wall.
Was that fun to do? I mean, to recreate a
Fun
crime
is not
scene?
exactly the word I would, but it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, as a Rhode Islander, it was nice to hear very good accents of the Northeast in general. I think it's very nice to get a good we all talk different things and we do strange things with our age. But for two of these daughters, when I left Rhode Island, I remember reading about your case, and I was wondering if there's been any sort of reform by how public defenders are paid in the state of Massachusetts, because I remember when about 5 years ago, we were actually having trouble getting people to work as public defenders because there was trouble paying them in the courts.
Did people hear the question?
No.
The public defenders, the question is in Massachusetts, there was a question about public defenders being paid, that they were losing public defenders because they couldn't afford to pay them. Is that correct, what you're saying? And you're asking Betty in
The
that?
reimbursement rate for people who were acting as public defenders in the state of Massachusetts
Was very low.
was very low.
I remember that controversy, but I don't know what happened. I don't follow that at all. So all I do know for Massachusetts is that they don't have a DNA statute, yet they're one of only two, that's right, and they don't have a statute to preserve evidence yet. Only one or two states in the U.S. So I don't know what they're doing with anything else either. Yeah.
In the back.
I don't want to offend you by questioning, but by this question, but did you ever question your brother's innocence through the process of so many years?
No, I never did. I always knew my brother was innocent. First, I knew him well enough to know that he is not the type of person to break into someone's home, murder them, rob them of their jewelry or money. Kenny's problems that you saw whenever he had a confrontation was usually somebody confronting him and him lashing out angrily in the wrong way. But secondly, this was my neighbor that was murdered. So the day this happened, my mother and myself went to Massachusetts, and we were trying to figure out what happened. We were very nervous for our grandfather that lived there and my brother, and we found out that my brother was questioned that day, and we said, well, he has a perfect alibi because he was in court that morning for assaulting a local police officer. And he had worked at a diner the night before all night, so he had an alibi, and they were looking for somebody that was caught, and they basically arrested him 2.5 years later. So I knew every day I knew that he was innocent.
In the back.
Yes, why was Kenny's death 6 months after his exoneration not included in the movie or acknowledged in the movie?
Well, it was a long process to come to that decision. I had it in the script for quite some time. We dramatized his death. And I was very interested to try and do that because for me, one of the things that this film is about is that whatever obstacles, whatever suffering, whatever trials life throws at you, if you have love in your life and you commit to that, it will transcend those trials. And I think that Betty Ann is a living example of that, and the love that Betty Ann and Kenny share. So for me, even in spite of Kenny's death, I believe that to be true. However, when people would read the screenplay, they would be, there's a phrase called pole-axed, where they would just be so blown away at the end of the movie that they went through all of this experience with her and suddenly, what? And it was very emotionally powerful, but the movie became about something else. It became a very dark exercise, and I found myself over and over again explaining to people what my intention was. No, see, it's not futile and depressing and tragic, and it is tragic, of course, but it's ultimately about the human spirit, and people weren't getting it, and I couldn't do it in a way that happened, so it suddenly made the movie at the end about something very dark and depressing and nihilistic, really. So I realized that's not what the movie was about, and I had to ask myself honestly, what are we saying here? And that the death, even though I felt an obligation to tell the truth, and I was sort of fascinated with the dramatic challenge, it did not belong. And suddenly when I took it out, the script started to really work. So then the alternative was to put it on the end crawl, you know, the information at the end. And we tested that many times with audiences both ways. And I essentially got the same reaction when we would screen the movie saying, and we tried many different wordings of it, you know, but, you know, tragically after 6 months of you know, well, all these different ways of doing it, delivering the information, you know, Kenny had a tragic accident and lost his life. Audiences, maybe in a group like this, 2 people would say, wow, we're so glad we knew that. That was so interesting and so emotional. 98% of the people would say, what? You can't do that to me after I've just been through this whole movie and I'm feeling what I'm feeling. And then you just throw that information at me. I'd rather find that out in a different context. That's not what the movie was. So we really talked and thought long and hard about it, and ultimately I made the decision not to include it, and that's why.
And I'd just like to add that it is about Kenny's freedom, not about him dying, and he would have loved this movie. Absolutely loved this movie.
The last 6 months were the best months of his life, right? Last 6 months were the best of his life, from what I hear.
They absolutely were. He was living life to the fullest.
Did you have a question on the aisle?
Yes, the 2 sons that played the part in the movie, did they really play the 2 sons, did they really act where the 2 sons act?
She's asking for the 2 sons, the actors, like the real Richard and Ben.
I think so. I think they are. They're very different.
They're great. Jeez, well, let's laugh. They're great kids. I've hung out with them, and they're really, she did an amazing job as a parent, and the fact that she did that while trying to become a lawyer, you know, is huge, you know, because they're really, really good. They're good men now, you know, they really are.
And where do your 2 sons go in there?
My 2 sons now, well, one of them is graduating from Johnson & Wales University next year, and the other just had a baby. I'm a grandma. And the baby's name is William Rockwell Correnti. And my other son is in business, and they work very hard. They have good work ethics. They, you know, work 12 to 13 hours a day, and we're just good guys.
On the aisle here.
Yes. She still has a relationship with her mother.
Question, if anyone didn't hear, it was asking, has Betty and her sons been able to establish a relationship with Mandy, Kenny's daughter, and does Mandy still have a relationship with her mom, Brenda?
And she does have a relationship with her mom, Brenda. Actually, Mandy went through counseling for about 2 years after this. But she has a healthy relationship with her mother under the circumstances. And yes, my kids and her, they're cousins, and they get along great. As a matter of fact, last weekend she was at another cousin's house for the weekend. So we get to see a lot more of her, which is good.
And can I also add, I'd like to add one thing to that, as Mandy said to me, Mandy was with us, we premiered the film 2 weeks ago at the Toronto Film Festival, and Mandy was up there celebrating with us. And she told me that, you know, the person she's most grateful to have in her life now is Betty Ann, and that Betty Ann's become her mother, really, you know, and she feels that even though she lost her father, she gained Betty Ann in her life, and that's changed her life in immeasurable ways.
Mr. Goldwin, can you talk a little bit about the rehearsal process that you went through with your actors? And
Sure.
Mr. Rockwell, can you talk about working with the director who's an actor as well, as opposed to the director who's not?
Okay, well, the first part, the way that I work with actors really is, it's all about communication, and we talk a lot before we ever rehearse, you know, to make sure that we understand each other and we're working toward the same purpose. So we talk a lot about what the story's about, who the character is for me, what's important to me, what's important to Sam. You know, we just kick around ideas a lot so that we're on the same page. And then in rehearsing, you know, I don't rehearse a lot on film. It's not like a play. So we, again, even in rehearsals, the week of rehearsals, we spend most of the time talking. but with all the actors together in a given scene, and then kind of get it on its feet and read it and test it out and get a feel for it. Maybe go to the real location if we can, if it's available to us, to kind of just get a feel for it and maybe roughly see what the possibilities for how we might stage it is. And then we kind of let it sit until the day of shooting, and then we rehearse intensively on the day. But really the most important thing is for us to be of the same mind about what we're trying to achieve. And that gets quite complex, you know, you really want to get at the underpinnings of that. So that when we're filming, I just say to Sam, remember we talked about A and B? So maybe that's great, but try X, because remember we talked about that, and oh right, yeah, and we have a real shorthand.
Yeah, no, I think it's invaluable working with an actor-director. I've worked with about 4 or 5 of them, and it's just a lot easier. You know, you have a shortcut to a vocabulary that you wouldn't have with somebody who's more of a technical director. But I think what makes Tony unique is that he has a very strong vision, and especially after spending 9 years with the project, he knows. He's got a very strong emotional attachment to the material, but at the same time, he's also very open to suggestions, and so he'll be open to an idea, and still having a very strong vision and being a leader of the ship, you know. So, but I think it's always good to be with an actor or director. It's a shortcut to talking.
We have room for one more question, so right here, sir.
Have you practiced law apart from your brother's case?
I do work for the Innocence Project only. For the New England Innocence Project, I work on some cases, and for New York, I help them with policy changes, legislatures, things like that. InnocenceProject.org, if anybody's interested.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.